السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. And continuing with our Ramadan series, Living with Prophet Yusuf, we continue where we left off yesterday. We stopped at the conversation between Yusuf and Zulaykha, and we pretty much closed that chapter. That chapter is pretty much done from this point. As Yusuf alayhi salam, he asked the king to set him over the storehouses of the land. Indeed, he will guard them with full knowledge. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're moving on. We're on ayat number 56, Surah 12:56, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ يَتَبَوَّأُ مِنْهَا حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ يُصِيبُ بِرَحْمَتِنَا مَنْ نَشَاءُ وَلَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ وَلَا أَجْرُ الْآخِرَةِ خَيْرٌ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very beautiful ayat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and thus did we give Yusuf, we established Yusuf in the land, meaning in Egypt. كَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And likewise did we establish Yusuf in the land, meaning in Egypt. يَتَبَوَّأُ مِنْهَا حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ. And he takes possession of the land and is able to go throughout the land as he likes, without any fear, without any grief, without any reservations, right? He went from this small kid who had no control over his situation. He was, beat up by his brothers. He was thrown into a well. He had to sit in the well. When you think about Yusuf's entire journey up to this point, his entire journey has been one of being a passenger. He was a passenger in his own journey all the way up into this point. You understand? He was, told by his father not to tell his brothers his dream because his brothers would plot against him. So he had to kind of keep that to himself. So he really had no control to share his dream with his brothers. His brothers took him away from his father. He had no control to refuse. They beat him. They beat him up really bad. They threw him in a well. He had no control. He had to sit in the well until some, caravan stumbled upon the well and pulled him out. He had no control over that. His brothers sold him into slavery. He had no control over that. The caravan took him from Palestine to Egypt. He had no control over that. They put him on an auction block. They sold him to the Aziz, the second most powerful man in Egypt. He had no control over that. He was seduced in the house of the wife of Aziz. He had no control. The only power and authority he had throughout that entire ordeal was to tell her no. We learned the power of no. He had no other resources. He had no way to defend himself. He had no way to argue on his behalf. He was a servant. He was a slave. What more could he do other than just say no? And then finally she persisted. She persisted until, she told him, you're going to either do what I told you to do. You're going to do what I commanded you to do, or I'm going to put you in prison and you will be considered from the lowliest of people in Egypt. And having no authority over his situation, he calls out to Allah, oh Allah, prison is more dear to me. He goes to prison and he finds out one of the guys is leaving, and the only last hope he has to be released from prison was to rely on this guy who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed shaitan to forget. So throughout his whole entire ordeal, he had no control over his situation. And now he has nothing but control, full control over his situation at this point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, كَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. That this is the way that we establish Yusuf in the land. يَتَبَوَّأْ مِنْهَا حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ. having full authority to go and come as he pleases, to command and instruct as he pleases. You understand? He went from having no control at all to having full control over his situation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَلِكَ مَكِّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ يَتَبَوَّأُ مِنْهَا حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ يُصِيبُ بِرَحْمَتِنَا مَن نَّشَاءُ وَلَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. That we bestow our mercy upon whom we will, and we will not cause the reward of those who do good to be wasted. He said, وَلَأَجْرُ الْآخِرَةِ خَيْرٌ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. And the reward of the hereafter is better for those who believe and who fear Allah, keep their duty to Allah. All right, the reward of the hereafter is even better. Talking about Yusuf, we talked about Yusuf, the elevated status in this life. And now we're talking about the elevated status of Yusuf in the hereafter. Allah says, and the reward of the hereafter is better for those who believe and those who had taqwa, piety. So all of what Yusuf went through was to establish him in Egypt. And that was a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're on ayat number 56. Surah 12, ayat 56. We come to lesson number 54. Lesson number 55. Lesson number 55. Pay attention. Lesson number 55. Learn how to connect the dots in your life. Learn how to connect the dots in your life. Instances in your life are not coincidental. Understand that. The things that happen to you in your life from childhood all the way up to present, from childhood all the way up into where you are right now in your life, nothing in your life has been haphazard. Nothing in your life has been coincidental. Every single incident in your life that has taken place in your life is a dot that is connected to another dot. It is your responsibility to sit back and ponder and reflect over everything that has taken place in your life and learn how to connect the dots in your life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And it was like this we established Yusuf in the land, in the earth. Meaning everything that Yusuf went through, from having the dream, from being thrown into the well, from being sold into slavery, sold to the caravan, taken from Palestine to Egypt, sold on the auction block, placed in the house of the wife of the Aziz. All of those things are connected. Every single one of those incidents are connected. And they all led up to where he is currently in his life. Learn how to connect the dots of your life. Everything in your life is connected. Nothing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does is just coincidental. It all has wisdom behind it. All of it. All of it. I can sit back and I can connect every dot in my life all the way up until where I am right now currently. I promise you that. You have to learn how to connect the dots. It's all connected. Every single incident that happened to you in your life, it's all connected. Sometimes Allah does not give us access to his wisdom. God doesn't give us access to his wisdom for wisdom that we don't understand. He doesn't give us access to his wisdom because of wisdom. Some of us are not ready to handle that type of access. Some of us are not ready to receive and appreciate that type of access. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah gives wisdom to those whom he wills. وَمَن يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Whoever is given wisdom has been given an abundance of good. He gives gives wisdom to whomsoever he wills. He opens the door. If you don't understand what is happening to you in your life currently, if you don't understand why this happened, why that happened, you're constantly questioning God about what happened and why this happened and why me, and I don't get it, I don't understand. You're not, seek to understand. You're not trying to understand. You're not seeking understanding. You're just sitting back looking at everything that's happening to you, trying to figure out why, and looking for somewhere to place the blame. God, why me? If God exists, then why he do this to me? Why he allow this to happen to me? Why did he take my mother away from me? Why did he allow me to lose my job knowing that I can't pay rent? Why did he allow my husband to leave me? Why did he allow my wife to cheat on me? Why did he allow this to happen to me? If God exists, why does this happen over here in the world? And why is that happening over here? Seek to understand. Questioning why is not asking for understanding. Ask God, God, I know, Allah, I know your plan. Your plan supersedes and trumps all plans. But please let me in. Give me access to understanding your plan. I don't know what your plan is for me. If you look at Musa alayhi salam, when he fled Egypt, right? And he left everything. Left his mother, his sister. He left everything, fleeing, running for his life. And as he's fleeing Egypt, he stops to rest. And he makes a dua. He says, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. He said, oh Allah, anything that you have written for me to have, anything that you have that is of good that you have written for me to have, I am in need of it right now. I don't know what you have written for me of good, but whatever it is, I need it right now. I am in need of it right now. It's a desperation. You are asking for Allah to give you just a little window, a little gap, a little window into his magnificent wisdom, his infinite wisdom. And sometimes Allah only gives you a little window. And you're grateful for that, because at least with that little bit of window into his wisdom and why he arranged your life the way that he did, you can begin connecting dots. You can begin connecting dots in your life to say, I get it. Now I understand why. And it makes you appreciate the trials, no matter how tumultuous, no matter how daunting, no matter how difficult, no matter how challenging. It allows you to appreciate all of the challenges and the struggles and the difficulties that you have gone through in your life. Absolutely, you get relief. Absolutely, there's relief attached to that. But you got some people just stumbling over their challenges and their circumstances. They allow every trial or tribulation to be a stumbling block instead of a stepping stone. You got to be able to look at your instances in your life. When we look at our lives, right? Instances in our lives are not coincidental. Rather, they are all like little pixels of our lives. And when you look at these pixels individually, they don't make sense. They don't make sense. When you look at your life and instances that have happened to you in your life, things that have happened to you in your life, you look at them as pixels. Pixels are all of those little elements that make up a picture. And if you look at each and every little pixel of your life, it won't make sense to you. You will never be able to make sense. But when you combine all of those pixels together, you have a complete picture. You understand? You have a complete picture. And that is your life currently, which is still connected to many other chapters in your life. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he is so merciful to you that he gives you a window, he gives you, a small little glimpse into understanding his wisdom, then, that's khair ala khair, that is good on top of good, man. Seek to understand. Seek to understand. Don't keep saying, I don't know why this is happening to me. You're not going to know why this is happening to you. You got to seek to understand. This is from the affairs of the unseen that you will never have access to unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you access. So Allah is telling us, كَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And likewise, we have established Yusuf in the earth, meaning all of what he went through up to that point was leading to him being the Aziz of Egypt. Who would have ever thought that this young boy his shirt was taken off of him, he was beaten by his brothers and thrown into a well. Who would have ever thought that him falling into a well would lead to him being elevated to the status of being the second most powerful man in Egypt? You understand? Who would have ever thought that falling down would lead to elevation? You understand? Look at the parallels. Look at how that happened. Sometimes we fall. And in falling, we learn so many lessons that we elevate ourselves and we propel ourselves higher than we would have ever gone had we not fallen. Tell me I'm lying. Much of our success has been due to our failures. Much of our success has been a result of failure. Failing is good. Falling on your face is good. It's humbling. Yusuf fell down the well only to be elevated to the second most powerful man in Egypt. It's a wonder, had you never fallen, would you have ever gotten to where you are? Have you had never made a mistake, would you have ever gone? Would you have ever gone as far as you went? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that what Yusuf experienced, as we've been journeying throughout Ramadan, we've been on this journey with Yusuf, and all of the experiences that he has had. And although it seemed like a tragedy, when you read his story from the beginning, it seemed like a tragedy. Now it doesn't look like a tragedy. It looks like triumph. It looks like triumph. We went from tragedy to triumph. We went from looking at Yusuf's story as a tragic turn of events for such a beautiful, handsome young man. And now it's triumph. He's sitting at the top. You understand? Next to the king of Egypt. But the dilemma with that is that we only realize our triumph in hindsight because we don't know our reality. We don't know the reality of our situation in real time. All right? It only makes sense in hindsight. Our life only makes sense when we look back on it. As they say, life is paradoxical, that you can only live it forward, but you can only understand it backwards. Life is paradoxical in that you can only live it forward, but you can only understand it backwards. Right? Like the story of Khidr and Musa. As they were journeying, فَانْطَلَقَا حَتَّى إِذَا, and they proceeded on in their journey until they reached this, until they reached that. Musa couldn't process what was happening in real time until Khidr finally said to him, هَذَا فِرَاقُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ سَأُنَبِّئُكَ بِتَأْوِيلِ مَا لَمْ تَسْتِعْ عَلَيْهِ صَبْرًا. That this is where we go our separate ways. And then I will inform you. We got to go back. We got to go our separate ways moving forward, but I'll go back and I'll explain to you the wisdom of everything that took place. You only understand your life you don't understand your life in real time. You only understand it in hindsight. You only understand it in hindsight after it has already happened, and then you ponder and you reflect on it, and then you're able to dissect it and pick it apart and understand the wisdom that was in it. But as it's happening currently, most of us don't have the patience, the foresight, the insight, the wisdom to process what is happening to us currently. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ هَلُوعًا إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. That the human being was created in haste. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. That when he is afflicted by evil, he's afflicted by something that is challenging or something that is difficult. هَلُوعًا جَزُوعًا. Jaza'. He frets and he complains and he finds fault. That's the human being. Created in haste. Created in haste. When some evil touches us, we lose it. We lose it. And then it's only afterwards that we sit back and we reflect on everything and we like, wow, it wasn't that bad. Wow, this is connected to this. And now you start making your connections. You have to learn how to connect the dots in your life. Connect the dots in your life now. Start now connecting the dots in your life and begin seeing the wisdom. And if you can't make that connection, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask Allah to make that connection for you. Ask Allah to give you a window into His wisdom subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moving right along. We come to ayat number 58. So now we're going to fast forward. All right. So Yusuf is placed in the position of the Aziz. The Aziz died when Yusuf was in prison. Yusuf comes home. The king welcomes Yusuf, give him the status. Yusuf said, no, I don't want that status. Just place me over, khaza'inul ard, that place me over the storehouses, place me over the wealth of Egypt. He's the accountant now for Egypt. He's taking care of the numbers. He's making sure the food is distributed equally. He's over that. Rightfully so. The king felt like, well, you interpreted the dream, so you obviously have knowledge about this. Let me place you there. So now he's ruling Egypt he's like the underboss. The king is the ruler. He doesn't really call the shots. He delegates. He puts people in place and they call the shots, right? That's what a leader does. A leader delegates. A leader doesn't do everything. You have some imams and students of knowledge who run in their facilities and you the end all be all. Like you do everything. The one-man army, one-stop shop. You got it all figured out. Everything flows through the imam. That's not a real leader. Anybody who understands anything about leadership, they know that leadership is about delegation. Leadership is about delegating. It's not about you as the leader taking charge and having a say in every single thing. No, as I said before, your job as a leader is not to know everything. Your job as a leader is to know everyone that knows everything. Your job as a leader is to know everyone that knows everything so that you can put people in place. You can delegate. You understand? You delegate. That's what it means to be a leader. A leader is not the person who's, he's giving the khutbah, he's teaching the classes, and he's cleaning the bathroom, and he's, on the musalla, and he's managing the money, and he's heading the board, and he's heading this, and he's heading that. It's like you're a one-man band. You got it all figured out. That's not what it means to be a leader, is that you're doing everything. You ever go to some communities and the imam, he's taking care of everything. You're going to wear yourself thin. That's not leadership. And sometimes you do it. Sometimes people do it out of ego. They just got to have their hands in everything. Got to have a say-so in everything. And when you got to have a say-so for everything, a lot of times that's as a result of being a perfectionist. A perfectionist is someone who feels that the job cannot get done unless their hands is on it. But in being a perfectionist, you're not a team player because you don't give room for those people who are working, your constituents, those who are working with you, to fulfill their job, to do what they are experts at doing. Because you feel that as a perfectionist, you have to have your hands on it in order for it to be done correctly. And that's not the case. Or you have control issues, ego. We've seen that in many masajid, many communities, where the imam has to have his hands in everything, got to have a say-so in everything. then why do you have people working with you? Why don't just close the board down, shut everything down, and just let you run everything on your own? So we fast forward. Yusuf has now been the Aziz. He has now been the governor responsible for Egypt's finances, the second most powerful man in Egypt for 7 years now. 7 years has gone by. As I said, the Quran doesn't give you the tafasil. It doesn't give you the details. It just gives you the gist. So Allah doesn't give you a timeline, right? That now we have to use inferences to show the timeline. So how do we know that it has been 7 years? Allah mentions in the very next ayat, وَجَاءَ إِخْوَةُ يُوسُفَ وَجَاءَ إِخْوَةُ يُوسُفَ فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and Yusuf's brothers came to Egypt. They were in Palestine. They came to Egypt. And they entered upon Yusuf, and Yusuf recognized them, but they did not recognize Yusuf. How do we know that it has been more than 7 years? Because what did Yusuf translate the dream? How did Yusuf translate the dream? Pay attention. This is how you use inferences to establish a timeline. So now we're done with the scene with Zulaykha. I'm saying fast forward 7+ years. He has been the governor of Egypt. And now his brothers come from Palestine to Egypt. How do we know that it has been 7 years? The drought, right? The drought. That is the only thing that would have driven the brothers of Yusuf from Palestine to Egypt. Why did they come to Egypt? They came to Egypt because it was a drought. And the drought didn't just affect Egypt, it affected all of the land surrounding. You understand? So we can conclude from that if Yusuf's brothers came to Egypt seeking supplies because there was a drought, Yusuf said that there would be 7 years of prosperity and then there would be 7 years of drought. So fast forward, he already went through the 7 years of prosperity. This is how we establish in a timeline. He already went through the 7 years of prosperity. Now we're into the time of drought and famine, right? So now it drives his brothers from Palestine to come all the way to Egypt. So that's how we can use inferences to establish a timeline here. So the very next ayah, Allah says, he says, we establish Yusuf in the earth. And then he says in the very next ayah, the brothers of Yusuf came to Egypt. وَجَاءَ إِخْوَةُ يُوسُف. And the brothers of Yusuf came to him. So after 7 years of prosperity, and now they're into the time of famine and drought. And now his brothers come. I pondered on this all day, just trying to imagine what Yusuf felt the moment he saw his brothers walk into the king's court. Just imagine so many emotions, so many feelings. Imam Sa'di, rahimahullah ta'ala, and his, everything was connected. Everything is connected. As I said at the very beginning, all of this was to bring Yusuf and his family to Egypt. Because in Egypt, what was going to happen? There was going to come the next prophets. There was going to come Musa. There was going to come, all of Musa was going to come, destroy Fir'aun, and then they were going to go back to Palestine. Right? Where was Musa taking Bani Israel? Musa was taking Bani Israel from Egypt back to Palestine. The promised land. You understand? When Musa was taking Bani Israel from Egypt, where was he taking them? He was taking them to Palestine. They were going back. So it kind of makes you wonder, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala arrange this whole situation to get them to Egypt to begin with? Here again, connecting the dots. Connecting the dots. This whole situation was to get Yusuf and Yaqub and all of them to Egypt, because from Yusuf's children and grandchildren and from his brother's grandchildren was going to come Bani Israel. Bani Israel was going to come from their progeny. And then was going to come Musa from them. And then Musa was going to take them from Egypt after destroying Pharaoh, take them from Egypt and go back to Palestine. You understand? Because that was the promised land. That was the land that they were promised, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eventually took it from them because they didn't deserve it. Their disobedience and their constant arguing and bickering with their prophets and they're scheming against their prophets and messengers, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took it away from them. They didn't deserve it. Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala said, لما تولى يوسف خزائن الأرض ودبرها أحسن تدبير فزرع في الأرض مصر جميعها في السنين. That when Yusuf took over the position of the Aziz, all right, were Bani Israel black? I'm sure they were of a darker hue. I can almost guarantee you that the Bani Israel that Allah is referring to in the Quran is not the Israelis that you see today. That is not Bani Israel. The Israelis that you see today, nobody who lives in the Middle East has pale skin. I just want you guys to think about that, including Jesus. No one, if you've ever been to the Middle East, if you've ever lived there, even when you look at like the grandparents of a lot of the Saudis, I'm not talking about the younger Saudis who have mixed lineages. I'm talking about a lot of the older Saudis, their grandmothers they don't have pale skin. They're brown skin like me. They almost look exactly like me. As a matter of fact, when I lived in Saudi Arabia, and I used to wear gutra over my head everywhere I went, Saudis would always ask me, are you Saudi? Because this is their skin color. You understand? No one who lives in the Middle East, lives in that region, has pale skin. No one. No one. Jesus, there's no way you could live in that region and have pale skin. No way. We're talking about 110 and 20 degrees. No way in the world that people live in that region has pale skin the way that you see Israelis having pale skin today, Saudis having pale skin. Like, it's unheard of. Unheard of. Think about Caucasians that go out into the sun. They have to put suntan lotion on their skin. They don't have melanin in their skin. Right here in America. There's no way. They can't go to the beach and go sit in the sun except that their skin begins to peel and their skin begins to turn red. And the heat, the hottest day in America, is in nowhere near in comparison to the hottest day in Saudi Arabia. And I'm sure in parts of Africa, I'm sure Egypt, I've never been to Egypt, but I'm sure parts of Africa, parts of East Africa, Northeast Africa, I'm sure it's extremely hot. And the only thing that separates Egypt from Saudi Arabia is the Red Sea, that little strip of water. Take a few hours on a boat to get from Egypt to Saudi Arabia on the boat going across the Red Sea, Al-Bahr al-Ahmar. That's the only thing that separates Saudi Arabia from Egypt. So the distance is not that far, and so therefore the heat can't be too much different. You understand? Heat can't be too much different. So there's no way in the world that you can tell me that people live in that region have naturally pale skin. Not going to happen. So the Israelis that you see today that are occupying Jerusalem, occupying, Gaza, occupying, Palestine, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free Palestinians and give them all that they deserve. These are some of the most the most fearless people that we've ever seen in our day and time. Fearless, man. You're talking about an elderly Palestinian woman standing in front of a bulldozer with a rock in her hand, just a rock. No fear, no signs of fear on her face whatsoever. But the Israelis that you see today are not the Beni Israel that Allah is talking about. Not in skin color, not in hue, and not in lineage. They are a mixture of something else. They are a mixture of something else. Just like many of the pale-skinned Saudis that you see today, they are a mixture of something else. Make no mistake about that. And some of them go for the lighter skin. So, they go and they marry outside their culture and they import, that Caucasian blood into, you don't have to take my word for it. Just do your research. Do your research. And the original Egyptians were dark-skinned just like I am. The original Egyptians are Nubis, a Nubi, and we know them in English as Nubians. Nubi. And you'll find them like in the desert and in places, rural areas. You won't find them in the cities in Cairo and things like that, scattered around. But not that it, I'm just answering the question. Obviously, color has relevance for us because it's how we establish our identity. If people constantly keep telling you that you came from slaves and that's your narrative, that's the only thing, that everything about your entire narrative traces its origin back to slavery, that means that your origin is just a slave. How do you build a life off of that? How do you build an identity knowing that, like the best thing that you contributed to the world is servitude to other human beings? Obviously, it's important. For somebody else, it might not be that important. But for me and for my children, that's important. Black representation, even on, level, or even on platforms. It's important to have black representation. My children look like me. I want my children to be able to look up at a speaker. If my children go to Islamic lectures and Islamic conferences their entire lives, and every time they look up at the podium, every time they look up, they're looking up to someone who does not look like them, doesn't represent them, doesn't speak, their experience, they begin to have an identity crisis. Like many of our children have an identity crisis. You understand? They begin to have an identity crisis because you're constantly looking up to people who don't look anything like you. They don't share your experiences. They don't speak your experiences, which is why some of you listen to me now, which is why some people don't listen to me. People from other cultures, they might take one listen at what I'm talking about and it doesn't resonate with them at all because I'm not speaking their experience. And there's some people who can listen to me one time for 5 minutes and I'm all up in your heart. I'm in your soul because I'm speaking your experience. And this is why diversity on platforms, Islamic platforms, this is why diversity is important. So it has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with nationalism. It has everything to do with representation of who we are. Speaking my language, speaking my experience, relating Islam in a way that resonates with me and my experiences. You take a street guy who spent most of his life in the streets, back and forth to prison. And then he becomes Muslim and he goes and he sits at a conference and a lecture and the guy is smiling and he's, today, brothers and sisters, today we're going to talk about Islam and Muhammad that doesn't resonate with me. I'm sorry. That you're speaking to college graduates. You're using a vernacular that resonates with people who've, have undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees. I'm a dude that came from prison. Spent my life around days of my life around killers. around criminal element. That's all I know. You understand what I'm saying? And to sit me in a lecture and sit in front of somebody who's using a vernacular that only appeals to people of a higher academic level, it's, you know what I mean? I have a problem with that. I have a problem with that. And so you can call me a nationalist, you can call me a racist, and it's always like that whenever, because if I was promoting an Arabized version of Islam, and I mean, when I say Arabized version, I mean that everything that is Arab is Islam. Everything that is Arab is Islam. And everything Islam is Arab. You understand? It's an Arabized version of Islam. It's dismissive of the diversity that Islam welcomes. It's dismissive of the fact that many of the great scholars of Islam were not even Arabs. Imam al-Bukhari was not an Arab. Imam Muslim was not an Arab. Abu Dawood al-Sijistani was not an Arab. He was Russian. Sijistan, which is an area today that is owned by Russia. You understand? These people were not Arabs. But we Arabized Islam. You understand? I'm not deflecting. I'm just segueing into my own discussion. I've completely forgot about your question. Your question is irrelevant. Your question segued me into another discussion that I felt was important. I'm not deflecting. Trust me. I've never shied away from any conversation, whether privately or publicly. Not deflecting at all. It's just that your question is no longer relevant. You don't control the narrative. You asked the question, but you opened the door for me to segue into another conversation that I felt was important. If you feel that what I'm saying is not important, then you can go open your own Facebook Live and you can start your own discussion. This is my platform, and you don't get to dictate to me what I say and what I don't say. Your question opened the door, and I took it in the direction that I felt was necessary. Because as African-American Muslims, I think that we suffer from an identity crisis. I do. On many levels, I do. And it's only when we begin promoting ourselves and promoting, because nobody else is going to do it. For years, nobody has done it. For years. I'm talking about in the Sunni Muslim community. I'm not talking about those who got one foot in the Warf Deen community. They're solid on their blackness. I'm not denying that. I'm talking, but they have another dilemma, and that is that they reject much of the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm talking about those who are Sunni, solid on their Sunniyah, solid in being, affiliated and, established on the Sunnah. They have never promoted, African-American Muslims as an entity. Very rare have you seen that. It has always been, we are the world. Just one big hodgepodge of, Meanwhile, other communities from other cultures that are attached to other cultures, they promote themselves, they promote their culture, they promote, prosperity amongst themselves. But then when someone comes along and says, hey, as African Americans, I think we should be doing the same thing. I don't fault them for that. I don't find fault with them for that. I find fault with us for not doing that. So I'm a racist. Let me just say that black people can't be racist. We're not a part of any system. Black people can have some levels of bigotry or some levels of discrimination, but we don't own anything to be, discriminating against anybody. We can voice our opinion, and that's pretty much all we do have as African Americans. We don't own anything. We don't own anything so as to make somebody else's life, uncomfortable or discomforting because, we control. We don't control anything. What do we control? How in the hell can I be a racist? But that is the phrase that is used for someone who actually loves his people. Because we are the only group of people that don't get to love each other. As long as we killing one another, as long as we backbiting one another, as long as we talking about one another, as long as we slandering one another, as long as we killing one another, it's all good. But the moment we start loving one another, the moment we start promoting the interests of one another, then it's an issue. You know, the $18,000 that I collected, that money went to African American masajid. You understand? I did not give a dime of that money to any masjid that was not owned, operated, and affiliated with African American Muslim experience, period. If you feel some type of way about that, if you thought it was going to be anything other than that, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I misled you. I'm sorry I misled you, but they don't get a break. You got big organizations now, big, huge masjids, big, beautiful, huge masjids that are now claiming that they are, zakat qualified. They qualify for zakat. They qualify for zakat? How you got a multi-million-dollar facility replete with elevators and, schoolyard and a school, and you zakat eligible? So you got Muslim organizations now telling people to give them their zakat al-fitr. Meanwhile, you got poor African-American masajid nobody give a dime to. But you got these huge multi-million-dollar Islamic organizations telling people they are zakat eligible. How in the world are you zakat eligible? Got people giving them their zakat money, thinking that you getting the Jannah because you give it. And I'm not saying that, you do it, but I mean, you have to sit back. When we're talking about giving zakat, you know what I mean? Like, zakat is an act of ibadah. That is a pillar of Islam. That requires you to use some level of intellect before you write a check, before you take out your bank card and send money to an organization. Like, come on, man. How are you zakat eligible? I'm curious. And they're asking them, have the audacity to ask Muslims to give up their zakat. Send your zakat al-fitr to them. But the moment we say love one another, let's stop backbiting one another, let's work together with one another, let's cooperate with one another, let's love one another, let's begin focusing on our issues. That don't mean I don't love you. It just means I love me more than I love you. Am I not entitled to love me more than I love you? Am I not entitled to love people who come from where I come from and understand the struggles that I understand their struggles? Am I not allowed to love them? Did not the Prophet ﷺ have a special place for Zayd ibn Haritha and Bilal and Miqdad ibn Aswad? Did he not have a special place in his heart for them? Did not the Prophet ﷺ say, Salman, minna ahlul bayt? Salman is a part of my family. Salman came from Persia. The only Persian during that time that converted to Islam. He didn't have anybody from his culture, anybody from where his region, where he was from, that was Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ made a special appeal to the Muslim community to recognize Salman as part of his family. Just like you would treat my family, that's the way you treat Salman. Salman minna ahlul bayt. You understand? Salman is a part of my family. He went above and beyond to make people who did not come from his culture feel comfortable. You understand? And in today's time, when I do that, and I'm part of this culture, and I do that, I'm a racist. I'm a nationalist. Look at Shadeed Muhammad, the nationalist. And the funny thing about it is African-American Muslims who will say that. Arabs might look at me and be like, right on, brother. I respect that because I would do the same for mine. But you got the Negro, the African-American. Oh, you're a nationalist. You're a racist. It's like, if you lost your identity, go find it. If you lost your identity, go find it. I'm sorry. I'm clear about who I am. I am clear about who I am. And I'm clear about who I tailor my message to. I'm clear about who I tailor my message to. So nonetheless, Al-Fakhr ad-Din al-Razi, he said, لما عم القحط في البلاد ووصل أيضا إلى البلدة التي يسكنها يعقوب وصعب الزمان عليهم جاء إلى يوسف. That when the famine and the drought spread throughout the land. It didn't just affect Egypt, but it also affected the other lands, the outer, the lands outside of Egypt. And what was closest to Egypt was Sham, the area of Sham, and that's Syria, Palestine, that area there. It affected Yaqub, those that were living in Palestine during that time. They were affected by that. And so Yaqub alayhi salam heard about this governor in Egypt who was generous, feeding people and selling people food during this time. And they were in need of supplies. They were in need of food and supplies. So Yaqub instructed his sons, minus Binyamin, to go to Egypt and go see this governor and go see this wazir or this aziz and go take some dirhams with you and go do some business with him. All right. Imam Sa'di said that this happened after that, meaning the brothers of Yusuf came after years of Yusuf already being in the position of the Aziz. So Imam Sa'di is also establishing what I'm saying is that this incident with Yusuf's brothers coming, this was fast forwarding years into Yusuf having already been the Aziz for some time. All right. So Imam Sa'di is also confirming that this was 7, 8, 9 years into Yusuf being the Aziz. So Yaqub sends his sons to Egypt to go barter, go do some business, and bring back some supplies back to Palestine. So they entered the king's court. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاءَ إِخْوَةُ Yusuf. And the brothers of Yusuf came to the king's court. This is a really, really difficult. I want to paint this picture for you. I want to put you in the shoes of Yusuf in this moment. Now here you are, not even thinking about your brothers, not even thinking about anything, just kind of living your life where you are at that moment. And so now Yusuf has this high position in Egypt. He's well respected. His name has been cleared. He married Zulaykha. Allah returned to her beauty, her eyesight, all this good stuff. Right? And now he's doing his daily, doing his daily duty as the governor of Egypt, handling, managing all of Egypt's wealth and, food and things like that. And so one day as he's sitting, next to the king in the king's court, sometimes people would have to, ask permission to enter upon the king. So this group of 10 men enter upon the king. Now let me ask you, how many years has it been since Yusuf seen his brothers? Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma said it has been 40 years. So right now Yusuf is roughly around 47 years old. It's been 40 years since he has seen or heard from his brothers. 40 years, man, subhanAllah. Yeah, he was about 7 when he got to Egypt. And then, he grew up in the house of the Aziz. And then once he was in his mid-20s, 30s, early 30s, as we went through all of that. And then, of course, 12 years in prison, right? That's a 40-year period. So he's about 47, 48 around this time. He hasn't seen or heard from his family in 40 years. So here he is, the second most powerful man in Egypt, sitting next to, the king, managing Egypt's affairs. And then comes his brothers through the door in the king's court. I want you to imagine the feeling, the anxiety, the feeling that Yusuf is feeling in this moment after seeing, not seeing them for 40 years, but these are the same individuals that did all of this stuff. The only memories, the last memories you have of your brothers, one of them telling you, we are no longer brothers. La qaraba baynana. There's no brotherhood between us. You remember when they were lowering Yusuf down into the well, And Yusuf's hollering, please stop, we're brothers, don't do this to me. And the brother says to Yusuf, we are not brothers. We're not brothers. Those were the last words he heard from his brother. He said, ask the sun, the moon, and the stars when you get to the bottom of the well to help you while you're down there. Those were the last words he heard from his brother. The last words. Subhanallah al-Azim. And now, 40 years later, after you done went through all of this, you done been through hell and back, and you sitting in this place of authority, and the king's court door opens, and here comes these 10 men coming in from Palestine, begging the king for food and supplies because they're experiencing a drought, famine in Palestine, and lo and behold, it's the same individuals. The same individuals, man. Absolutely. Talk about triggered. You ever seen somebody that did you dirty and you haven't seen them and then you run into them? You ever, sometimes you kind of don't even want to talk to them. You're so filled with anxiety and you know, there's a lot of emotions running through you. You just kind of avoid them altogether because your last memories with that person, right? You ever have a bad relationship and then you run into that person in the store, you see that person from a distance, you kind of duck in, you don't want the person to see you, not because you're afraid, you just don't want to have that conversation. Like, it ended on bad terms, and just leave it where it is. I don't want to relive that. Because the moment you see that person, they're triggering stuff in you. They're triggering things they said to you, things they did to you. You understand? Things they said to you, things they did to you, things they threatened you with. And just seeing them puts you back in that space. Just seeing them puts you back in that space. And usually when somebody does you dirty like that and then you see them after some time, they're usually in a worse situation than they were in at the time when they did you dirty. Guarantee you. In my life, that has never not been the case. That has never not been the case. I have never run into somebody who did me wrong or did something to me, crossed me, betrayed me, and I run into them later on, except that they're in such a horrible situation, you almost feel sorry for them. You almost feel sorry for them when you run into them. And that brings me back to the point that we discussed yesterday, and that is that pain is distributed equally in oppressive situations. Don't think because the person oppressed you that they're off somewhere living their best life. They're not. Allah says in that if you suffer the harm, then they suffer the harm just like you suffer the harm. In ta'lamuna فَإِنَّهُمْ يَأْلَمُونَ كَمَا تَأْلَمُونَ وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ. That if you suffer the harm, then they suffered harm as well. You might not see it because you parted ways. The person crossed you, the person betrayed you, the person divorced you, the person physically abused you, the person verbally abused you. You went your separate ways. You never seen that person again. But you don't know the trials and tribulations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had prepared for that individual due to their oppression. You understand? Nobody gets away with murder. Not when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the king. Nobody gets away with murder. In Allah's court, in the king's court, nobody gets away with murder. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Nobody gets away with being oppressive. It all comes back. It may come back to your children. It may come back to your grandchildren. Hell, it may come back to your whole progeny. You know what I mean? There are people that have had generational curses. Generational curses. Come to you, come to your children. Don't come to you, you slide. But it comes to your children. Comes to your grandchildren. Your great-grandchildren. Generational curses that have been put on people because of the wrong that their forefathers have done to people. You understand? That's real. So they walk into the court And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَعَرَفَهُمْ. Yusuf recognized them immediately. Immediately. Generational curses. You know. And you have to be careful, man. You have to be careful how you treat people, because you never know how that's going to come back to you, man. You never know how that's going to come back to you. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he recognized them. But they, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. That Yusuf recognized them immediately, as soon as they walked in. Yusuf recognized them. Those are my brothers. You know. But they didn't recognize Yusuf. Why didn't they recognize Yusuf? Obviously, it's been 40 years. Obviously, it's been 40 years. Why didn't they recognize Yusuf? Allah says Yusuf recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. Why couldn't they recognize Yusuf? Question. Why couldn't the brothers recognize that that was Yusuf up there? Why couldn't the brothers recognize? Because they thought he was dead, right? Any proof for generational curses? I don't understand. I got to give you proof for that? Well, there's an ayah in the Quran where Allah says, and fear a fitna that will not only befall the wrongdoers from amongst you. Meaning, trial, tribulation doesn't just only affect the people who were initially involved in the wrongdoing. Other people get affected by that as well, meaning it can happen to your children. It can happen to your grandchildren. There's other people. Allah says, fear. وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً. Fear of fitna that will not only affect just the wrongdoers from amongst you. I love how we always ask for dalil. What's the evidence for that? And what you always want things spelled out for you, rather than going back and looking at Islam as a whole, as a system, and being able to arrive at the understanding. Everything is not going to be spelled out for you. Right, the Jews, generational curses. Thank you, Bani Israel. Look no further. Any proof for that? What's the dalil for that? As if to say, if there's no evidence or ayah that points to that, then I'm lying. That doesn't exist. Anyway, moving right along. The Yusuf alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. And the reason why they didn't recognize him was because, they left him for dead. They didn't believe that he even survived. They didn't know what happened with him. They didn't know what happened to him. And they didn't care either. They didn't care anyway. And so, not only did they think that maybe he was dead or whatever the case may be, they couldn't imagine that after what they did to him, that he would be sitting next to the king as the most second powerful man in Egypt. Never in their mind could they have even imagined that that was Yusuf. You understand? They considered him insignificant. He was nothing in their eyes. So when they looked up at the Aziz, the governor, they never even thought, the thought never even crossed their mind that that was Yusuf. And that shows you how some people just write you off. Some people just write you off. You're nothing. You're never going to be anything. And then, lo and behold, you become this individual and people are like, I could have never even imagined you in this position. I know you couldn't have. I know you couldn't have. So they didn't recognize him. Never could they have imagined that this was the brother that they discarded, that they threw away. They sold to a caravan of strangers who whisked him off into Egypt, some foreign land, never to be heard from again. They could have never imagined that this is their brother. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. Somebody that you discarded, you threw away, that nobody wanted anything to do with. And now here you are years later, the second most powerful man in Egypt. Subhanallah al-Azim. The rose that grew from the crack in the concrete. If you guys are familiar with that poem by Tupac Shakur. He is the rose that grew from the concrete. Absolutely. Yusuf is the rose that grew from the concrete. How could you sprout up after so many trials and tribulations and challenges? How could you still manage to arrive at this place when there were so many obstacles put in front of you, so many challenges, so many hardships, so many obstacles, and you still managed to sprout and develop in the midst of all of that? He is the rose that grew from the concrete. If there was ever a metaphor that was more applicable, he is the rose that grew from the concrete. Despite all of the obstacles, despite all of the challenges, despite everything, he still managed to arrive at the position of the second most powerful man in Egypt that they were now in need of. They were now in need of. Some of us were written off by our own families. Some of us were told by our own mothers and our own fathers, you ain't gonna never be shit. How many of us been told that? You ain't gonna never be shit. You ain't gonna never amount to anything. You're gonna grow up and be just like your daddy. You're gonna grow up and be just like your aunt. You're gonna grow up and be just like this. You ain't shit. You ain't gonna never be shit. How many of us were told that? And look at us now. Look at us now. You're not rubbing it in anybody's face. You're just patting yourself on the back that despite everything that everybody thought about me, I still made it. Despite. I didn't prove you wrong. I proved me right. I didn't prove you wrong because I'm not in competition with anybody. I didn't prove you wrong. I proved me right. You understand? I ain't trying to prove nobody wrong. I'm trying to prove to myself that I was right. When you told me I wasn't shit, I told me I was the shit. You understand? You told me I wasn't shit, and I told myself I was the shit. And only time would tell. Only time would tell. You understand? So I'm not trying to prove you wrong. I'm trying to prove to myself that I'm right. I'm not in competition with you. I'm in competition with me. That's it. They could have never imagined. They could have never imagined. And so in that moment, a lot of emotions tend to rise when you come face to face with your oppressor, especially when you are from a place of authority. A lot of emotions are coming up. I can only imagine him sitting there watching his brothers come through that door, humbled. The last time he saw them, he was on his way down into a bottom of a well and they were standing over top of him. Now they come into the king's court and they're looking up at him. You understand? The same thing when the Prophet ﷺ told Bilal, stand on top of the Kaaba and call the adhan. And all of the people who used to look down on you now have to look up to you. All of the people who never heard your voice, now everybody will hear your voice. You understand? You understand? The Prophet ﷺ told Bilal, get on top of the Kaaba, Bilal, and call the adhan. And now everybody who looked down on him are just some black slave from a descendant of Africa, just a slave. He's nothing. He used to sleep with the animals in the barn because he wasn't even worthy of sleeping in the house. And all of the people that looked down on him, now they had to look up at him standing on top of the Kaaba calling the adhan. And all of the people who never heard his voice when he cried, when he was begging for his life, now everybody hears his voice. You understand? That is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises people. That Allah will raise some people and Allah will humiliate others. One of Allah's names is Ar-Rafi'. Allah is the raiser, the elevator. Ar-Rafi'. And one of Allah's names is Al-Khafid. Al-Khafid. Allah is the humiliator. Allah is the humiliator. He raises some people and he humiliates others. Here they are now begging him for food and supplies. So you think about somebody wronging you in the worst possible way, and then you sitting from a place of authority with the ability to extract retribution. It is a very, very awkward feeling. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he said, عَرَفَهُمْ بِأَوَّلِ نَظْرَةٍ إِلَيْهِمْ. Ibn Abbas said that Yusuf alayhi salam, he recognized them from the first glance. The first time he glanced at them, he knew that those were his brothers. Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala said, لَمْ يَعْرِفْهُمْ حَتَّى تَعَرَّفُوا إِلَيْهِمْ. That Yusuf only knew them after he began to ask them questions. So when they entered Yusuf alayhi salam, he began speaking to them in their language. Obviously, in their part of the world, in Palestine, where they were from, they spoke a different language. Ibraniya was their language. So Egyptians, they have a different dialect. So Yusuf alayhi salam, being raised in the house of the Aziz, he spoke both languages. He spoke the language of the people of Egypt, and he spoke his native language of Ibraniya, where he was from Palestine. So he knew their language. So when they walked in, Yusuf asked them, Man antum? Who are you? Akhbiruni man antum? Wama amrukum? Yusuf asked them, who are you? Tell me who you are and what's your affair? Why are you here? قالوا نحن قوم من أرض الشام رعاة أصابنا جهد فجئنا نمطار. They said to Yusuf that we are from the area of Sham, the area of Sham, which is the area of Palestine, Syria. And we are sheep herders. We have been afflicted by drought and famine. So we came to, do some bartering. We bought some merchandise with us. We want to barter. We want to trade. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he continued asking them, so where'd you come from? Who's your father? Do you have any more brothers? They said, Inna nahnu ikhwatu banu abin wahidin wa huwa shaykhun sadiq yuqalu lahu Ya'qub. They said, we're all brothers from the same father. We're all brothers from the same father. Look at how they, look at how they expose themselves. Look at how they expose themselves. So they say, we're all brothers from the same mother. And our father, from the same father. And our father, his name, he's an honest and truthful man. His name is Ya'qub. He's a prophet from the prophets of Allah. So Yusuf says, Kam antum? How many are you all together? Yusuf is trying to see if Binyamin is still alive, if his father is still alive. He don't know his brothers was treacherous. So he don't know if the brothers went back, double back, and did the same thing to Binyamin. So Yusuf is trying to ask questions in a roundabout way to get a general idea of where Binyamin is. That's his brother. Where his father is. So he said, how many brothers do you have? And they said, كنا 12 فذهب أخ لنا معنا إلى برية فهلك فيها فكان أحبنا إلى أبينا. So Yusuf asked, how many of you are there? And so the brother said, there's 12 of us in total. There's 12 of us. Mind you, they're talking to Yusuf. They don't even know that they're talking to Yusuf. So Yusuf asked them, how many are there? And they said, it's 12 of us in total. We had one brother. He went with us out into the desert one day and got lost and got killed. And, he was more beloved to our father than we were. Oh, well, we don't know what happened to him. We got lost. We don't know what happened to him. He was more beloved to our father than he was. I guess not so much, because look what happened to him. It's just like very sarcastic. And Yusuf is trying to maintain his composure the whole time. قال كم أنتم هاهنا. Yusuf says, how many of you are here now? قالوا 10. They said 10. Yusuf said, فَأَيْنَ الْآخَرَ. So Yusuf, he understood, if there's 12 of you and one of you got lost in the desert and never showed up again, how many of you are here? 10. So that means, where's the other one? Yusuf's smart, man. Here again, the power of the question, right? We talked about that in the beginning of this story, the power of asking the right questions. So Yusuf asked them, فَأَيْنَ الْآخَرُ. So where's the other brother? You said you guys had 12. One of them you got lost and never heard from him again. So where is the other brother? Meaning Binyamin. قَالُوا عِنْدَ أَبِينَا. They said, he's with our father. قال يوسف فأتوني بأخيكم الذي من أبيكم إن كنتم صادقين. So Yusuf says, well, bring that other brother here to me if you are truthful. Bring the other brother. So that brings us to the next ayah. The next ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in surah number 12, ayah 59, وَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ قال ائتوني بأخ لكم من أبيكم ألا ترون أني أوفي الكيل وأنا خير المنزلين. And when he supplied them with all of their provisions, Yusuf gave them everything that they asked for, gave them the provisions that they asked for, according to their needs. He said to them, ائتوني بأخ لكم من أبيكم. Bring me this other brother of yours from your father. Bring this other brother back to me. Don't you see that I give full measure and I am the best of hosts? Look at how I supplied you. I gave you everything you need. Trying to use incentive. He wants them to come back. He wants them to bring the other brother back. So Yusuf goes on and he says, فَإِن لَمْ تَأْتُوا بِهِ فَلَا كَيْلَ لَكُمْ عِنْدِي وَلَا تَقْرَبُونَ. Yusuf said, and if you do not bring the brother back to me, then there shall be no measure of corn that I will give to you. I'm not going to give you any more supplies, and don't come near me. Don't even bother coming back, basically. If you don't bring the brother back to me, then there's no need for you to come back. What he means is that I have given you enough food to last you for a year. So if you're not going to come back to me with the brother, then there's no need for you to come back. Don't even come back. All right? And this was all an incentive for them to come back with Binyamin. Then we move on to the next ayah. He said that if you don't come back, ayah number 60, if you don't bring him back, then there's no need for you to come back because I've given you everything that you need. So what did the brothers say? Because they're looking at everything that Yusuf has done. You know, he's won them over by supplying them with everything they need. They said to Yusuf, the next ayat, number 61, قَالَ سَنُرَاوِدُهُ عَنْهُ أَبَاهُ وَإِنَّا لَفَاعِلُونَ. They said that we will try to get permission from our father to bring him back, right? We will try to get permission from our father, from his father, to bring him back. And so Yusuf says to one of his servants, قَالَ لِفِتْيَانِهِ اجْعَلْهُ بِضَاعَتُهُمْ فِي رِحَالِهِمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَعْرِفُونَنَا إِذَا انْقَلَبُوا إِلَى أَهْلِهِمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. Yusuf told one of the servants, put their money, the money that they bought the food with, all of the merchandise that they came to barter with, all of the money that they bought to buy the food with, put that back in their bags. Basically, everything that Yusuf gave them from supplies, he gave it to them for free. Because everything that they paid for it with, Yusuf gave it back to them. He stuffed it in their bag. So he said that when they return home, when they open their bags, they will see that I returned everything back to them. Here again, another incentive for them to bring Binyamin back. He wants Binyamin. So Yusuf feared that if they didn't have anything to barter with, the reason why he gave them the merchandise back, the reason why he gave them the money back was because he feared that they didn't have anything else. Everything that they brought to Egypt to barter with was all they had, and that they would use that as an excuse not to come back. So Yusuf didn't want to leave them any excuses. So he put all of the things that they brought with them to purchase the food, he put it back in their bag to give them no excuse not to come back, because perhaps that was all they had. You know what I mean? Perhaps that was all they had. So Yusuf did a smart move by putting it back in the bag, leaving them no excuse for them to come back. SubhanAllah. They had no reason not to return. They could never say, well, we bartered with all we had when we came the first time. Yusuf gave it all back to them. It was mentioned that Yusuf kept one of the brothers with him, the oldest brother, Sham'un. Sham'un was his name, right? And Yusuf told them to leave this brother with me. Leave one brother with me as a ransom, because he was the brother who said, don't kill Yusuf, but throw him in the well. Yusuf remembered him. Yusuf remembered him. So Yusuf told the brothers, leave him with me. Leave the older brother with me so that I know that you're coming back. And the reason why he kept the oldest brother with him, Sham'un, right? The reason why he kept him was because he was the one that said, don't kill Yusuf. La taqtulu Yusuf. But throw him in the well. Right? Alquhu fi ghayabat al-jub. Throw him in the bottom of the well. So Yusuf is kind of like repaying him. So Yusuf is going to keep him back, hold him here. I'm going to, honor your stay until your brothers get back. But you stay with me. But he did that because that was, and as I said to you before, good only begets good. When you do good to people, people remember that. People remember that. Where did we extract that lesson from? When Yusuf was purchased by the Aziz and he brought Yusuf home. When he brought Yusuf home, he told his wife, honor him. Ekrimi mathwai. Honor his stay with us. And Yusuf remembered that. This was the first person that ever showed me mercy throughout this whole situation. Right? And Yusuf is repaying this brother back while he doesn't even know it. Just like Yusuf paid the Aziz back when the Aziz didn't know it. They paying it forward. You extend good to people. You extend good to people and it comes back to you. Yusuf extended the same good back to the Aziz when his wife trapped him in the room and he refused to sleep with her. He was returning the favor behind his back. Now here Yusuf is returning the favor to the oldest brother for saving his life, because had it been left up to the other brothers, they probably would have killed him. They probably would have killed him. But here Yusuf is sparing him like he spared him. SubhanAllah, man. Meanwhile, he doesn't even know that that's his brother. And Yusuf is just doing his part to repay him back for what he did. So I'm going to keep you. I'm going to honor your stay here with me until your brothers get back. But he don't even know that the reason why Yusuf is doing that is because he was the one who came up with the idea of not killing him. SubhanAllah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَحْسِنُوا كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكُمْ. And do good just as Allah has done good to you. You understand? Do good just as Allah has done good to you. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has extended good to you, then it would behoove you to extend that good to other people. So Yusuf tells, his servant, now Yusuf has a servant, right? The irony in that. وَقَالَ لِفِتْيَانِهِ, and Yusuf says to his servant, now Yusuf has a servant. Yusuf went from being a servant to now being in a position of kingship and now having servants. Go figure. Boy, how the tables have turned. How the tables have turned. SubhanAllah. He went from being a servant to having servants. SubhanAllah al-Azim. So he tells the servant, put their stuff back in their bags. Meaning, what I supplied them with, I gave it to them for free. Balash. Balash. For nothing. I gave it to them because I gave them their merchandise back. فَلَمَّا رَجَعُوا إِلَىٰ أَبِيهِمْ قَالُوا يَا أَبَانَا مُنِعَ مِنَّا الْكَيْلَ فَأَرْسِلْ مَعْنَا أَخَانَا نَكْتَلْ إِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. So they returned home. They returned back to Palestine. All right? So they returned home. And they go to Yaqub and they say to Yaqub, oh, our father, no more measure will be given to us unless we take Binyamin with us back to Egypt the next time. So send him with us, so we shall get our measure and we shall truly guard him and protect him. So now they're trying to convince Yaqub to let Binyamin go with them back to Egypt the next time. Yusuf, smart, pay attention. Yusuf also knew that they were liars. Yusuf also knew that they were liars. Yusuf knew that Yaqub would not trust them to let Binyamin go with them. He knew that. Yusuf knows his father. So by putting the merchandise back in their bag, when they open their bag and they see that they have been given the merchandise back, so they had the supplies from Yusuf plus the stuff that they left with, they knew that it was more likely that Yaqub would kind of acquiesce. He knew that Yaqub didn't trust them. He knew Yaqub wasn't going to trust them by themselves. They were liars. And he knew that their narrative would not be sincere enough for Yaqub to let Binyamin leave with them. So by giving them back the stuff, it added to the incentive. It added to the narrative that, hey, this governor over here in Egypt is actually a good guy. All right? So Yaqub, no. What was it? 3697. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So they go to Yaqub and they said, no more measure shall we be given unless we take Yusuf with us the next time. And if we go with Yusuf the next time, then we will truly guard him. We will truly protect him. So Yaqub retorts. Yaqub says, هل آمنكم عليه إلا كما آمنتكم على أخيه من قبل فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين. So Yaqub says, am I supposed to trust Binyamin with you just like I entrusted you with Yusuf before? Am I supposed to trust you? This shows you exactly what Yusuf was thinking, that Yaqub wasn't going to trust them. So he had to do something that would make Yaqub bend, that would make Yaqub acquiesce. He knew that Yaqub wasn't going to trust them alone. So he had to do something remarkable, like give them back everything that they brought with them, plus the supplies. You understand? To add credence to the narrative. So Yaqub says exactly what Yusuf was thinking. He says, can I entrust you? Can I trust you with Binyamin just like I trusted you with his brother before? He said, but Allah is the best to guard and protect, and he is the most merciful of those who show mercy. Meaning, if I decide to let Binyamin go with you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect him, and Allah is the most merciful of those who have mercy. You understand? Meaning, Allah is not going to do this to me twice. Which brings me to lesson number 56. And that is always have husnul dhan, always have good thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As you think about Allah, so shall Allah do for you. As you think about Allah, so shall Allah do for you. If you believe that Allah is not going to forgive you, guess what? He's not going to forgive you. If you believe that Allah is not going to respond to your dua, guess what? He's not going to respond to your dua. If you believe that Allah is not going to get you out of this sticky situation, guess what? Allah is not going to get you out of that situation. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ana inda dhanni abdi bi. I am as my slave thinks of me. And I will do for my servant what he believes I will do for him. I am as my servant thinks I am. Why would Allah do something for you and you don't even believe that he can do it for you? Why would he do it? If you don't believe that Allah is going to forgive you, why would he forgive you? You have no faith in him. You have no faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can you say you believe in a God that you have no faith in? How? Why would Allah answer your dua? You say, oh Allah, I called on you and you ain't answer my dua. Why would Allah answer your dua when you don't even have faith that he can respond to you, that he will respond to you? Ana inda dhanni abdi bi. I am as my servant thinks I am. And I can do for my servant what he believes I can do for him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do for you as much as you believe that he can do for you. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing for you is contingent on your faith in his ability. Allah doing for you will be contingent on your faith in his ability to do for you. If you don't believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do it, guess what? It ain't going to happen. Yaqub said, فَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ حَافِظًا وَهُوَ أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Allah is the best one to protect. If I decided to send Binyamin with you, Allah is the one to best protect him, and he is the most merciful of those who have mercy. Meaning Allah is not going to do that to me twice. He took one of my sons away from me. Allah will not do that again to me. His husnul dhan, his good thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He had good thoughts. He had husnul dhan with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He trusted that Allah would not do that to him again. So when you say, I'm going to end with this. So when you say, I'm not going to get married again. I had a horrible experience with marriage the first time. I'm not going to get married again. I'm done with marriage. I'm never going to get married again. Number one, that doesn't mean that you're going to be celibate for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that you ain't going to never have a relationship again in your life. That means that you have already made reservations to do what is haram. God forbid. God forbid that you have reached such a low place in your life that you have made reservations to do what is haram. God forbid. I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never test me, never test you guys with that. I pray that is never our statement. I pray that is never our thought process. I pray that is never our philosophy that I'm never going to get married because I had such a horrible experience. I'm done with marriage. Been there, done that. Yeah, but you're not done with relationships. So that means that you have already made reservations to do what is haram. Number two, when you say I'm done with relationships, I'm done with marriage, been there, done that, you have no faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being able to bring about a new situation for you. You have no faith in God. You have no faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is it even safe for you to call yourself one of his servants? It is an honor to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is an honor to believe in Allah. It is an honor to trust in Allah. It is an honor to have faith in Allah. It is an honor to have certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's abilities. That is an honor. And we say, oh, I'm done with marriage, been there, done that. I've had such a horrible experience. Meanwhile, the horrible experience, have you taken any responsibility for that? You don't share in any of that responsibility? Not the haram courting, not the haram premarital courting, not the haram engagements, not the haram sexual relations that you had before y'all got married? Not the haram, everything that led up before the marriage? And then you thought that you was going to enter into the marriage and you was going to live happily ever after? That's what you thought? You thought disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not going to have consequences? You thought those consequences were not going to come back on your marriage? After you spent your whole time premarital courting in the haram, did you think that that was never going to come back to you? And then when your marriage crumbles, you turn around and you say, I'm done with marriage. I've been there, done that. Never going through that again. You gotta be kidding me. You take zero accountability, zero responsibility for the part that you played in the mess that you created. The mess that you created. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِ النَّاسِ. That corruption, oppression has appeared on land and on sea because of what the hands of man have done. Man did this. God didn't do this. Man did this. Don't say if God exists, why does people in Africa starving? Why does people over here starving? God didn't do that. White supremacy did that. Understand? White supremacy did that. Don't blame that on God. Don't say if God exists, why does people starving in Africa? Why does people starving over here in Syria? Why? Man, God didn't do that. God allowed that to happen. As he says in the ayah, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. Fasad, corruption, oppression has appeared on land and on sea. بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِ النَّاسِ. Because what the hands of man have done. Man did this. Then he says, لِيُذِيقَهُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي عَمِلُوا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. So he will allow them to taste some of what they have done so that perhaps they may turn back to God. Perhaps you may turn back to God. You understand? Don't blame that on God. Don't say if God exists, why this happened and why that happened and why that happened. Look into the deeper matters and the deeper sins of man. Look at the evil of man. Don't blame that on God. Don't turn that on God. God allows that to happen so that perhaps some people will see people starving in Africa and they will create charities. Some people will see people starving in Syria and they will create orphanages. They will create charities and they will begin helping to kind of offset the oppression that man is responsible for, not God. To offset the oppression that man is responsible for, not God. So if you want to use that as your excuse not to believe in God, see, that's why I don't even believe in God. That's why I think all religion is false. If that's the narrative, if that's what you tell yourself to make yourself sleep at night, then that's on you. But let it be known that you're sleeping on a pillow of lies. Lies that you tell yourself. Lies that you tell yourself. You understand? That's not God. That's man. But having husnul dhan, having good thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah can bring me through any situation. Allah can get me out of any situation. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is laying on the ground. Guy stands over top of him with a knife to his neck. Said, "Oh Muhammad, who's going to save you from me?" The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam looked at the man and he said, "Allah." You think that because I'm unarmed, I'm laying on the ground, you're standing over top of me with a sword to my neck. All the odds are against me, and you think even in that moment I lose faith in God? You gotta be kidding me. He said, who's going to protect you from me now, O Muhammad? The Prophet ﷺ looked the man in his face and he said, Allah. You understand? The man started shaking. He was so amazed at the Prophet ﷺ's level of certainty in such a situation where the odds were against him. His hand started and he dropped the sword. The Prophet ﷺ picked the sword up and put it to his neck and said, who's going to protect you from me now? You understand? Who's going to protect you from me now? Now that the shoe is on the other foot, who's going to protect you from me? You understand? Have husnul dhan. Yaqub said, Wallahu khayru hafidhan. That Allah is the best to protect. وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And he is the most merciful of those who have mercy, meaning God would not do this to me again for a second time. Allah would not do this to me again for a second time. He took my first child for wisdom that is beyond what I understand, but I know that he is the most merciful of those who have mercy, he would not do that to me again. Why don't you tell yourself that about marriage? Tell yourself that you had a horrible first marriage, second marriage, but God would not do that to you again. God is too merciful to keep putting you in painful situations over and over and over again. Tell yourself that. Tell yourself that. He is Arhamar Rahimin. He's the most merciful of those who have mercy. He would never put you in a situation like that again. Tell yourself that and believe that. And then go after marriage in the proper way and see if it don't work. See if it doesn't work. But you got to have husnul dhan. You got to believe in God. Believing in Allah, believing that God exists is one thing. Having faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's abilities is a whole nother chapter that many of us have not explored yet. You understand? Believing that Allah exists, believing that God is there. Many of us are Muslim just on the fitrah, just on the natural disposition that we were all created with, knowing that God exists. Yeah, you know God is there, but you don't live your life like you believe in his abilities. You don't. You don't believe in his abilities. You just believe he's there. But you got to believe in his abilities. He said, Huwa Arhamar Rahimin. He's the most merciful of those who have mercy. He would never put me in that situation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. We'll stop here. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Wa subhanaka rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.